Today I want to review Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. I recently finished this book and I highly recommend it. I want to go through some of the takeaways and a very quick and brief review of the 12 rules. So here we go. The first rule is stand up straight with your shoulders back. Peterson here goes into a lot of detail to talk about and emphasize the importance of showing your confidence through your body language. Now he takes a really interesting example of lobsters, which fight all the time, and the winning lobsters actually have higher serotonin levels. Now for those of you who don't know, serotonin is a really important neurotransmitter that helps in mood regulation and social behavior. So the takeaway here from the first rule is fix your posture and show your confidence to the world by standing up straight and putting your shoulders back. Number 2 is treat yourself like someone you are responsible for. Now ultimately, my takeaway from this chapter was that once you change your attitude and your perspective towards treating yourself that as if you're treating a loved one like a friend or a family member or even your pet that you care so much about, that changes your perspective, and then perhaps that really affects your attitude when it comes to taking care of your body, taking care of your health, making sure that you do what is necessary to reach your goals and to basically be kind to yourself. Rule number 3 is make friends with people who want the best for you. And I think this is very simple, but also very necessary life advice, because the people that you choose to surround yourself with, whether you like it or not, will ultimately have an effect on your mood, on your behavior, on your outlook on life. So if you surround yourself with people who are positive, who have the right attitude in life, who are friendly, who are helpful, who are compassionate, who have goals in life, and who want to achieve something in life, ultimately that has an effect on you. Number 4 is compare yourself to who you were yesterday and not to who someone else is today. Now it is, I think, a human tendency to always compare ourselves or judge others and question why am I not in the same place as my friend, or why don't I have what the other person has. But again, Peterson goes into a lot of detail about how you actually don't really gain anything by comparing yourself to other people. What you can do is really focus on your own life and focus on your own goals and try to be better than who you were yesterday. And that is ultimately already an achievement if you can improve, if you can take perhaps mini steps or baby steps to improve just a little bit every single day. And I think that what is also important to consider is that you never know what the other person is going through. If you compare yourself to someone who looks happy in their life, who looks like they're successful, and they may very well may be, but you don't know what is going on in their mind. And so it is really a waste of time if you are constantly comparing yourself to the other people, because you actually never really know what that other person is going through in their mind. Rule number 5 is do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. Now this chapter, what Peterson is trying to go into detail with is to really emphasize how important it is for children to have the right outlook on life, a very realistic outlook on life as they're growing up. If parents do not set any limitations for them, if they don't set any boundaries for them, then they're obviously going to have an unrealistic expectation once they're adults and they're on their own. So it's important for parents to set clear boundaries for their children, because if they don't, they may end up hurting them. 6 is also very simple. Set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. Now for this one, on page 157, I want to read a passage for you that I found very interesting. So, clean up your life. Consider your circumstances. Start small. Have you taken full advantage of the opportunities offered to you? Are you working hard on your career or even your job? Or are you letting bitterness and resentment hold you back and drag you down? Have you made peace with your brother? Are you treating your spouse and children with dignity and respect? Do you have habits that are destroying your health and well-being? Are you truly shouldering your responsibilities? Have you said what you need to say to your friends and your family members? Are there things that you could do, that you know you could do, that would make things around you better? Have you cleaned up your life? If the answer is no, here's something to try. Start to stop doing what you know to be wrong. Start stopping today. Rule number 7 is pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. And here Peterson ultimately goes through details about how important it is to really think about your ultimate goal or your greater goal that is meaningful to you and that speaks your truth. Instead of pursuing what is expedient, which means what provides you instant gratification or immediate pleasure, or just for today, or just for this week, or just for this year, because ultimately that's not fulfilling. Now I want to read a passage from page 200. Expedience, that's hiding all the skeletons in the closet. That's covering the blood you just spilled with a carpet. That's avoiding responsibility. It's cowardly and shallow and wrong. It's wrong because more expedience multiplied by many repetitions produces the character of a demon. It's wrong because expedience merely transfers the curse on your head to someone else or to your future self in a manner that will make your future and the future generally worse instead of better. And then he goes on to describe finding the meaning for your life. To have meaning in your life is better than to have what you want, because you may neither know what you want nor what you truly need. Meaning is something that comes upon you of its own accord. You can set up the preconditions, you can follow meaning when it manifests itself, but you cannot simply produce it as an act of will. Meaning signifies that you are in the right place at the right time. And I also thought this was really interesting when he says, meaning is the ultimate balance between, on the one hand, the chaos of transformation and the possibility, and on the other, the discipline of pristine order. So when you choose to seek meaning in your life and to follow that instead of what is immediately satisfying, then when you will perhaps feel this balance in your life, instead of constantly seeking what is going to provide you pleasure next. What is the next thing that's going to immediately satisfy me? And I think from very small details to very on the small scale and on the large scale, this really does play a big role in, again, your outlook on life, how you treat yourself, your body, your health, how you treat others around you, your family perhaps. Setting that intention to prioritize having meaning in your life is ultimately more fulfilling. I know this is long, but bear with me because it's worth it. Rule number 8 is tell the truth, or at least don't lie. Now, there are lots of great passages in this book. I picked one on page 223. It is our responsibility to see what is before our eyes courageously and to learn from it, even if it seems horrible. Even if the horror of seeing it damages our consciousness and half blinds us. It is the act of seeing that informs the individual and updates the state. It is for this reason that Nietzsche said that a man's worth was determined by how much truth he could tolerate. Now again, Peterson goes to a lot of details, but ultimately my personal takeaway was how important it is to be true, to be honest and tell the truth in that voice in your own head, even if it's, the micro little things that may be bothering you. But if you are courageous enough and brave enough to speak out when necessary, speak out when something needs to be said, that ultimately helps you become a better person in life and helps you perhaps, it's kind of like a ripple effect. If you teach yourself to tell the truth when it is necessary and when it needs to be said, then things are stopped before they lead to much more worst case scenarios. Because if we look away and don't speak up when it's necessary. You can think of an example, like at work, perhaps someone is being bullied with, it starts off with very silly jokes, and then it escalates to the next step, and it gets worse and worse. And if that person is courageous enough to speak up for themselves at the beginning, instead of just ignoring it and pushing it away, then it doesn't accelerate to the next step. Let me know what you think. I mean, there are many, many examples that we can talk about this, but I thought this is also a very useful tip in life in general. Rule number 9 is my favorite. This is assume the person that you're listening to might know something that you don't. On page 245, I want to read a really interesting passage for you, which is about Carl Rogers. How should you listen? Carl Rogers, one of the 20th century's great psychotherapists, knew something about listening. He wrote, "The great majority of us cannot listen. We find ourselves compelled to evaluate because listening is too dangerous. The first requirement is courage, and we do not always have it." He knew that listening could transform people. On that, Rogers commented, "Some of you may be feeling that you listen well to people and that you have never seen such results. The chances are very great indeed that your listening has not been of the type I have described." Now, this is what he suggests. He suggested that his readers conduct a short experiment when they next found themselves in a dispute. So, next time you are in a dispute, try this. Stop the discussion for a moment and institute this rule. Each person can speak up for himself only after he has first restated the ideas and feelings of the previous speaker accurately and to that person's satisfaction. And Peterson says that he's found this technique very useful, and he ultimately routinely summarizes what that other person that he's listening to summarizes what that person says, and then asks them if they are satisfied with his response. And so you can imagine you're in an argument, and when you're listening to the other person's arguments, all that is being processed in your mind is, what are my counter arguments? You have to quickly think of your counter arguments. But imagine what happens if you take a step back, and instead of rushing through your thoughts to come up with a counter argument, you listen first, and then you summarize what they just said to the best of your ability, and do this genuinely, and then ask them if this is what you meant. Is what you meant A, B, and C, and have I understood correctly? And when you do this in a dispute, then I think automatically this results in both parties to become a little bit more calm, a little bit more light, because part of the frustration that arises when two people are in an argument is that deep down you know that you're not being listened to. And once you know that that person cares about what you say, and that person cares about what you say, genuinely listens to you, and has proven that they have understood your point, then you kind of feel a relief. And I think this was really great advice. Number 10, be precise in your speech. Here Peterson goes through describing the importance of language and the power that words can have. Because if you are precise in your speech, if you're clear about how you feel and you mean what you say, then this will clarify the problem, and so that will help also in finding a solution. Now on page 276, I'm going to read this passage. Why refuse to specify when specifying the problem would enable its solution? Because to specify the problem is to admit that it exists. Now here, my understanding or my takeaway is that we perhaps subconsciously don't want to specify the problem, because once you're clear that, okay, problem A exists and this is exactly what is bothering me, then you ultimately have the responsibility to face the problem, and you admit that it exists. And then now you cannot be ignorant and say, okay, everything's fine, everything is perfect, it's working well. Once you're precise in your speech and you identify what it is exactly that is bothering you, perhaps, then that's the only way to get rid of it and to find a good solution, an ideal solution. And what I found eye-opening is that he said perhaps once you identify a problem and it leads you through days or perhaps 2 months of misery, that might be at the end of the day worth it, because if 2 months of misery lead you to find a solution and to eliminate the problem for good, then ultimately it's worth it. Number 11 is do not bother children when they are skateboarding. Now, my main takeaway from this chapter was that what makes life interesting is when you have the courage to do something that is a little bit risky, that there is when you're living on the edge, when you're when you're courageous to take a certain step that you perhaps wouldn't do in another scenario, because that's what helps you develop as a person. If everything is absolutely 100% predictable and safe, then there's really no reason to pursue anything. Rule number 12 has a funny title. It's Pet a Cat When You Encounter One on the Street. This goes into detail about Peterson's personal life and his dealings with tragedy and pain. My takeaway was that when you have a good moment in life, when you have those precious moments, maybe it's your favorite morning coffee, or if it's your favorite song that comes up when you're sitting in a cafe, or it's the smile on a stranger's face. These are little moments that make life precious and that make life perhaps meaningful, and it gives you little snippets of happiness, and it's important to embrace those when they present themselves to you, such as a cute animal such as a dog or a cat on the street. Now he goes on to again detail about his dealings with tragedy and pain, and I found this passage on page 343 particularly interesting, because he was questioning why me, why this, why would something like this happen to me? If you're already everything, everywhere, always, there's nowhere to go and nothing to be. Everything that could be already is, and everything that could happen already has. And it is for this reason, so the story goes, that God created man. No limitation, no story. No story, no being. This idea has helped me deal with terrible fragility of being. So, again, imagine that everything in life is going perfectly. Everything is done and everything is achieved. This actually reminds me, perhaps this is a reason, this is something that I think about often, that you hear often, on the news of, incredibly successful people who commit suicide, unfortunately. And you have to ask yourself why. Why would someone who looks like they have it all do something as tragic as that? Well, there are many, this is actually another topic, but I think that's how, that's what makes life unique. When you have these challenges, which everyone does, no one's life is perfect. There are always ups and downs, and there are things that you have to deal with that you did not choose. If everything was as it should be and there was nothing to be achieved, then actually there would be no life. Then perhaps life would be meaningless. And so this really stands out for me that he says, no limitation, no story. So it's like kind of like watching a movie. When you have a movie or a story, you have to have the plot. And then once it gets over the climax and the problem is solved and the hero's back home, then that's when you feel relieved, and you feel like you've learned a lesson, and you feel like you've ultimately grown and become a better person, and you've developed. And so if there are no limitations and challenges, then there is no story. And if there is no story, there is no being. So perhaps it's a reminder for us to embrace our challenges in life, look at them as opportunities for growth and opportunities to kind of perhaps bring a little bit of spice into life. Yeah, I would love to hear your comments. Again, this book was quite detailed. He goes through a lot of details and a lot of history. Very, very interesting. And I also think it's very well cited with pages and pages of studies that he refers to. For those of you who don't know, and I didn't mention this, he's a clinical psychologist from University of Toronto in Canada. And yes, so if you haven't read this book, I highly recommend it. Thank you so much for listening to my video. I would love to hear what you think.